Kayuhui is a, sorry for keeping mispronouncing your name, I guess, um, is a PhD.
That's perfect. Yeah.
Well, that's too kind of you. Is a PhD candidate and teaching fellow at Boston College. And the title of the presentation is The Double Expressivity of a Person in Husserl's Social Phenomenology, from Subjective Spirit to Cultural Spiritual Shape. Please.
Thank you very much. I think I would just jump right into the paper. So this paper explicates the systematic importance of the concept of expression in Husserl's social phenomenology, so to say. And we argue that the structure of expression prevails in Husserl's analyses of interpersonal relationships, cultural objects in the surrounding world, and the different levels of community and culture. I'm not sure if I have time to really get to that part, but that's the whole idea. We will begin with a consideration of Husserl's concept of individuum and Urgegenstand and his project of grounding the human sciences. And after that, we will explore the expressive structure of a person in three interrelated aspects. First, expression indicates the peculiar manner of the constitution of a person as a spiritual subject, in contrast with the constitution of a person as a unity of the body and the soul. The second, there is an essential relationship between a person and her surrounding world, and hence not only is a person always given as a system of expressions, but also is a cultural object given as such, cultural object which includes books, buildings, so on and so forth. In other words, spirit is expressed in the system, person, surrounding world. Third, the system, person, and surrounding world, that is the unity of subjective spirits, so to say, and objective spirits, can also be an expression of communal spiritual life and culture, what Husserl calls higher order personal unities, once they are constituted through appropriate communal acts. And hence it belongs to the essential structure of a person to be doubly expressive of subjective spirit as well as cultural spirit. So let us motivate the inquiry with a brief consideration of Husserl's phenomenological project of grounding the human sciences. For Husserl, we can secure the foundation for the human sciences and avoid any reduction of them into the natural or naturalistic sciences only if we can clarify the material ontological difference between the subject matters of these two branches of science. So in other words, only if we can clarify that the region natura, so the material ontological region for natural or naturalistic sciences, and the region Geist, so the material ontological region for the human sciences, broadly speaking. So only if we can clarify that these two spheres, they are separate and irreducible regions, can the foundation for the human sciences be secured. And hence, the particular task, so to say, of grounding the human sciences turns out to be a global task of building up ontologies for both nature and spirit, natura and Geist. And in Ideas 1, Husserl spells out some of the important steps involved in this project. So roughly put, it consists of two principal steps, and after, of course, the performance of the epoche and the phenomenological reduction. First, the phenomenologist needs to pick an individuum. So I quote from Ideas 1, which is defined as a this here, whose substantive essence is a concretum. And second, she needs to show that this individuum can be a primal object, a Urgegenstand, which unifies different abstract and concrete essences into a region, such that everything within the region obtains a sense through referring back to this primal object. Husserl helpfully gives us an example of what this means, and let me quote a rather long passage. So he writes in Ideas 1, I quote, "If we transport ourselves into any eidetic science at all, for example, into the ontology of nature, then we find ourselves not oriented toward essences as objects, but instead toward objects of the essences that in our example are classified under the region of nature. We observe thereby, however, that object is a title from many different yet interrelated formations. For example, thing, property, relation, state of affairs, set, order, and so forth. These are obviously not equivalent to one another because, but instead refer back respectively to one kind of object that has, so to speak, the prerogative of being the primordial kind of object, with respect to which all other objects present themselves to a certain extent merely as variants. And in our example, the thing itself naturally has this prerogative. So put differently, end quote. So put differently, in order to build up an ontology of nature, we need to pick an essence, and in our case, a thing, and to show that first it is an individuum, so is eidos is a concretum, and then it is an Urgegenstand, from which other essences typically included within the region nature receive their senses only if they are either things or properties of things or somehow related to things. That is, if they can refer back to things as Urgegenstände. So Husserl unambiguously points out that the essence thing satisfies the requirement when he writes it. And I will skip a little bit here. However, so we have talked about the region Natur, the region of nature, and that's supposed to be the ontological foundation for human science, the natural sciences. But however, in the case of the region of the spirit, it is not clear what counts as the Urgegenstand. This paper argues that person serves this role. The concept of person designates the eidetic singularity of the substance of the region of spirit. The stock of essences, abstract or concrete, typically included in the world of spirit, acquires sense determination by referring back to person. The denizens of the world of spirit, so to say, ranging from personal individuals as members of a community to cultural objects like books and buildings, to different levels of collectivity like family, nature, nation and culture, acquire their senses by referring back to the eidos person. All of these objects stand in an expressive unity with person. So that's the overarching claim. In Ideas 2, Husserl embarks on an analysis of the experience of another person through empathy. He qualifies the givenness of the lived body, the life of the other, as an expression of her psychic life. A few sections later, he more explicitly states that, I quote, the thoroughly intuitive unity presenting itself when we grasp a person as such is the unity of the expression and the expressed that belongs to the essence of all comprehensive unities, end quote. According to Husserl, a person presents herself to our consciousness as a double and unitary unity, consisting in the sensuous body and the spirit. The two aspects are, however, essentially united. In order to fully understand the structure of expression in the givenness of a person, we have to first contrast it with the conception of a person as a unity of a body and a soul. In his now famous analysis of corporeality, Husserl argues that through double sensation, we can constitute her own lived body. One can constitute her own lived body, both as a physical body, so as a Körper in the real world, and at the same time as a lived and sensing body as a life. The soul, as a unitary psychic stream, which continues to develop in one's life, is constituted as something introjected in the lived body. What is crucial for our analysis here is that the physical body and the soul are separately substantial, and they are bound together as two systems of predicables united in a founding-founded relationship. A founding-founded relationship obtains in an intentional object if and only if, first, the founded layer of givenness cannot be reduced to the founding strata, and two, the founded layer cannot be given without the founding being given. So the founding and founded relationship, when we are talking about the intentional object, is that the founded, the higher one, cannot be given without the lower one, but it cannot be reduced to the founding one either. To spell out the contrast between an expressive unity and a founding-founded unity, we can take a look at the case of image consciousness. This is the kind of founded consciousness we have when we look at a physical object which is configured as an image. Examples of an image include photograph, painting, portrait, or statue, so on and so forth. In Husserl's insightful analysis, we see that the object of image consciousness has a threefold structure. So first, the picture is perceived as a physical thing in the real world, and on this basis, an image object resembling an image subject is founded. If we take away the founded image consciousness, the moment, so to say, of the intentionality of an image that's specifically responsible for giving us the image, we take away this level. What is left is the perception of the neutralized physical image thing. So in the experience of an image, we first have to perceive a physical sensuous substratum. And on that basis, we see an image as something that is built upon the physical substratum, but it cannot be reduced to the physical. Yet the image cannot be simply reduced to its physical substratum, and for the experience of an image cannot be completely described in physical terms. In this regard, the unity between image thing and image proper is a founding and founded unity, since without the founded stratum of meaning intention, the founding material stratum, the frame, the canvas, the colors, remains the same. And two, the founded meaning cannot be exhausted by the founding. The same structure can be found in the person conceived as a unity of body and soul. The soul is a unity of sense encompassing a stock of psychic predicables. And for this reason, it cannot be reduced to the physical body. But on the other hand, the soul cannot be given in other ways than as a meaning stratum founded on the physical body. As a psychological concept, the soul designates a substantial real unity, which manifests itself through different states and modes, and it has its own lawfully regulated functionality. For example, we can study how different psychic states and properties, say perceptions, sensations, feelings, etc., how these things connect with each other, and what lawful regularity can be found in this unitary flow. And the name of the science which studies these relations from a more or less empirical point of view is psychology. However, Husserl maintains that the person conceived as a spirit or as a member of the spiritual world is essentially expressed by the body, and that spirit and the body should not be conceived as forming a founded unity. Let us start with the similarity between the manner of givenness of spirit and that of the soul, what they have in similar. So, like the soul, spirit is always apperceived. That is, it belongs to its essence that spirit cannot be given directly through sensuous perception. However, apperception per se is not a distinctive characteristic of the manner of givenness of spirit. For the late Husserl of the genetic phase, our experience of the world is basically shot through with different levels of apperception. Even basic sensuous perceptions have their apperceptive elements. What singles out the constitution of spirit is a peculiar manner of apperception. On the one hand, not only is spirit not sensuously perceived directly at this or that moment, but also is it non-sensible and invisible by essence. On the other hand, spirit cannot be meaningfully intended without some source of incarnation, that is, without incorporating the sensuous body. It is this double relation between spirit and the body that spirit is essentially non-sensuous, yet necessarily anchored in the body, that distinguishes the structure of expression from other kinds of apperception. And in this regard, Husserl calls a person a double unitary unity. However, this is not enough to distinguish between an expressive unity and a founded unity. To this end, we have to emphasize that the sense of the non-sensuous, so the spirit in our case, is essential to the whole object, without which the sensuous substrate will be apprehended differently. As Husserl notes, and I quote, "In the attitude of the human sciences, the other spirit is thematically posited as spirit and not as founded in the physical body, end quote. Similar to the soul, a material stratum is necessary for the givenness of a person. Yet we cannot, in the genuine sense, take away the empathizing consciousness, intending another person while keeping the sensuous perception of the material substrate, the other's body, intact. As Sarah Heinemann insightfully points out, Husserl maintains that there are two separate constitutive paths starting from what is pre-given to the senses. Sensuous givenness is involved in the constitution of physical things, but it can also be taken up in another constitutive path, orchestrated in the constitution of sensuous objects with spiritual meaning. Husserl's point is not that the physical is only a moment included in the personal expressive unity. His point is that the physical per se is excluded from the apprehension of a person. The distinction between the two kinds of unity can be explained only if we have sufficiently clarified the distinction between soul and spirit. There is an inclination to identify the two, while indeed spirit is, in the robust sense, not a soul. Mastering this difficult distinction, as Husserl puts it, is central to the understanding of the distinction between nature and the world of spirit, between the natural sciences and the human sciences, and the sciences of the spirit, between a natural scientific theory of the soul on the one hand and the theory of the person, as well as the theory of society on the other hand. According to Husserl, the concept of spirit involves different strata. The elementary sense of spirit is a human being as a member of the personal human world. From the above analysis, we see that spirit is not equivalent to the psychic life of a person. To perceive a person is, according to Husserl, to apprehend a human being as a member of the personal human world. The body is not an indication of an inner psychic life. Rather, the body itself is the person expressing herself. There is no inner psychic, no soul as a substantial unity, substantial reality, hiding behind the body in our primordial experience of another person. For this reason, the person cannot be given, first of all, as a physical body on which is founded the soul. This picture of a person and as a unity of a body and a soul is completely foreign to our experience of a person in the personalistic attitude. Both a person given in the naturalistic attitude and a person given in the personalistic attitude possess a mental sphere, so to say. The difference is that in the naturalistic attitude, the mental operation of a person is conceived as a unitary psychic phenomenon grounded in the physical, while in the personalistic attitude, we take the mental as immediately expressed through or as the sense of the bodily sensible materials. The body itself is part of the person, and it expresses her spiritual life. In the human sciences, what we need is not the dualistic picture of a person as a unity of the body and the soul, but the conception of a person capable of expressing her individual spiritual life through her body, and then through objects invested with a spiritual significance, to which I will now turn. So Husserl argues that the analysis of the expressive structure of a person is a fundamental analysis embracing all spiritual objects. Indeed, Husserl characterizes our experience of objects like books, theatrical plays, and tools as experiences of spiritual objects or objective spirit, assigning them a status above physical objects and akin to persons, similar to persons. Hence, spiritual objects are also expressive of spirits. Husserl aptly points out that a person, as a member of the personal human world, belongs to the surrounding world of things. The surrounding world of a person is a world consists of things and other persons, and a man is what he is as a being who maintains himself in his commerce with the things of his thingly and with the persons of his personal surrounding world, and who, in doing so, maintains his individuality throughout. There is what he calls a relation of reciprocal determination between the personal subject and its surrounding world. The meaning of things in one's surrounding world determine the comportment of the person by motivating her to act or react in a certain way. The person is, on the other hand, free to manipulate the things in the surrounding world and bestow on them new meanings. This reciprocal determination defines the person as a member of the personal human world and not as an individual abstracted from worldly relationships with things and people. In short, when we experience a person qua a person, we always at the same time apprehend her relations with the surrounding world. Let me pause a moment, and I think I will have to skip quite a bit. So crucial here is the double relation of spirit and its sensuous substrate. As we established, the other person is not given first as a physical body, which we can then add a distinct spiritual sense to it. Rather, the sensuous givenness of the body is immediately perceived as an expression of a spirit. Likewise, when we perceive an object having spiritual meaning, we do not first perceive the physical thing deprived of human meaning. Rather, the spiritual meaning animates the whole of the sensuous given. Husserl emphasizes from time to time that the unity at issue here, so the unity of expression, is not external or causal, even though a physical, or better, a sensuous ground must be there as the substratum. One can always, with a shift of attitude, turn towards physical appearance. But this does not mean that the physical is first perceived, on which we add spiritual meaning. A book is perceived as a book, not because we first perceive a mere physical thing and then add to it the meaning of being a book. We perceive a book immediately as a book, because the sensuous givenness or the sensuous pre-givenness is apprehended directly as a book. In other words, the spiritual and the sensuous pre-given, the spirit and the body, are not bound but fused together. In these cases, the sensuous is essentially included in the spiritual being, not one layer added on top of another. In this regard, the structure of expression that we explained in the above concerning a particular subjective spirit or human person, as Husserl notes, embraces all spiritual objects at the same time. Okay. So now I would like to turn to the higher order personal unities. As mentioned above, spirit is a stratified concept, and the elementary sense of spirit is a person as a member of the personal human world. Spirit at this level is expressed through the body or objects in the surrounding world. Husserl also extends this concept of spirit to encompass what he calls higher order personal unities, including family, nation, supranational communities, so on and so forth. As John Drummond aptly notes, these social collectives consist of individual personal spirits, but the former cannot be reduced to mere aggregations of the latter. Rather, these spiritual unities are unified by specific principles. The expressivity of an individual personal spirit is thereby complicated. A person can be treated as expressive of her own spiritual life, but she can also be considered as a member of a collective. In the latter case, the person is an expression not only of her own spiritual life, but also of the communal spirit. Once the dimension of sociality is introduced in full scale, the expressivity of the system, person, surrounding world is tremendously multiplied. It will take us too far afield to explicate the constitution of the different levels of communalization. Suffice to say that with specific mutual communicative comprehension and communicative acts, as Husserl said, different levels of spiritual meaning are constituted and supplied to the communal spiritual world. Hence, gesticulations and comportments of a person are not only expressive of her personality, they all now have extra layers of spiritual meaning, expressing also the habitual life form of a community, or even communities of different levels. As Husserl writes in the Vienna lecture, and I quote, "Personal life means living communalized as I and we within a community horizon, and this in communities of various simple or stratified forms such as family, nation, supranational community." The word life here does not have a physiological sense. It signifies purposeful life accomplishing spiritual products. In the broadest sense, creating culture in the unity of a historical development, end quote. So at the highest level, the individual personal spirit can be unified into a cultural spiritual shape, of which the spiritual Europe is always Husserl's favorite example. And in this regard, expression transcends the restriction in the individual surrounding world and becomes the global structure of the world of spirit. Not only can an individual spiritual life, but also can the communal spirit be expressed by persons and cultural objects. That's the end of the paper. Thank you very much for the patience.
Thank you so very much, and thank you for keeping track of the time. That was perfect. Please, any questions or comments, raise your hand, or you can write something, I don't know, right hand in the chat or whatever. Yeah, Sonja Rinovna-Kreidel, I'm sorry. Please.
Just say Sonja. It's not that complicated.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for this talk. I enjoyed that. My question refers to this idea of an expressive unity of body, of a person and her body. I'm wondering whether you would compare what you said with the first logical investigation in the second volume, where Husserl talks about the relation between meaning and signs. And the sentence you said, where I really thought about that, was the physical per se is excluded from the apperception of a person. I would say that this corroborates itself with regard to the meaning-sign relation according to the logical investigations, because Husserl would say, if it is the case that a sign does not bear meaning, then it immediately stops functioning as a sign. That is, it stops being a sign. So there is a very tight expressive unity between sign and meaning, and the very same seems to be the case in your reconstruction of this, of the person as an expressive unity. Because you also would say that the body is the person expressing herself, but if this expressive function stops, then the body transforms into something we would call a physical thing, a material stratum that is not manifest as a person's existence, isn't it?
Thank you very much, Sonja. That's an excellent question. I will say 2 to 3 points in response. First is, I'm glad that you mentioned the first of logical investigations in which we find the earliest presentation of Husserl's theory of expression. But the problem here is, indeed, there is actually, if not a shift, but at least a kind of development of the theory of expression that we can find in logical investigations, especially in the first logical investigation, to the, so to say, transcendental period, if we stick to this kind of characterization. So the expression, the concept of expression that we can find in ideas 1 and 2. The issue here, well, it's kind of complicated, but I'll just say that the difference here is that while in the logical investigations, as we said, the concept of expression is construed mostly within the framework of language and meaning. And so we can say that a sign, as an expression of certain meaning, if it stops functioning as an expression, then it's reduced back to a mere physical appearance without meaning anything, so without being a sign. But then in Ideas 2, we find a very interesting discussion of the expression, which no longer considers it only within the framework of language, but within the framework of embodiment. So now Husserl is proposing that, and that's the second point that I'm going to make, is that implicitly he is making a distinction between the sensuous and the physical. So we will say, well, Husserl will say that the physical, as I said, is excluded. The physical per se is excluded in our apprehension of a person in the spirit, in the personalistic attitude. But it doesn't mean that the sensuous pre-givenness is not included. So the issue here is we do not actually see a person while in the daily life, in the personalistic attitude, first as a body, as a moving object, as thing like an inorganic or like an animal moving around. We perceive a body immediately as a what I call an expressive body, and it does not. We do not construe it as a physical existence in the first place. But it doesn't mean that the sensuous pre-givenness is not here included. So we, of course, have to so to say, receive the sensuous pre-givenness. But what we do, so to say, if I'm allowed to use this kind of language, is not to constitute, on the basis of the sensuous pre-givenness, a physical object. The sensuous pre-givenness are apprehended or orchestrated to constitute a person and as an expressive unity. So there's a distinction that we can make. And so in this regard, the physical, so the treatment of a person as physical thing, so basically, is not included or should be excluded from our conception of a person within of all the human sciences. And so here, another point is that the expressive unity, once it is, so to say, liberated from the framework of language and conceived or construed within the framework of embodiment, the unity here does not signify a higher level meaning expressed on the basis of physical sign. Once the expressive function ceases, as you said, if the person died, it no longer expresses anything. Either we stop constituting him or her as a person, as expressing, as a member of society, as capable of expressing himself or herself, or we conceive of her or constitute her, to experience her as nothing other than physical object. So the basic patterns of constitution still preserved here, but it's the matter of the expression, the expressive unity being impossible to be like conceived as a unity of sign, physical sign, and the meaning. The expressive unity must be kept intact, and the physical substratum, the sensuous substratum, will be apprehended differently if we do not constitute it as a person in the world of spirit. So I hope it is clear. It's a little bit of complication, but yeah, hope this is helpful.
Yes, it was. Thanks. So just one sentence. So you would argue that our perception of bodies changes in the very moment a person dies, because then the body does not express a person's spiritual life anymore.
That's a very interesting question. I don't, well, in my reading of Husserl, I don't see him addressing this experience explicitly. But I think he will say that there is a kind of a negotiation of the different patterns of constitution. So the moment the person dies, it suggests a kind of ambiguity, it suggests a kind of confusion of how we can or how we should perceive the person. Should we still perceive him or her as a spiritual subject? Or is he or she now inviting us to conceive or constitute her as nothing other than a physical dead matter? So there's this kind of ambiguity, which first, I don't think Husserl has addressed that, at least in the ideas. And I think this kind of true experience of how we should deal with, or how best to respect the dead body, this kind of experience of uncanniness, of ambiguity, kind of confirms, so to say, in turn, these different patterns that we have for constituting or construing what a person is.
Thanks.
I'm afraid we'll have to go on unless you've got something really quick and really urgent. Maybe. So thank you so much again.